Welcome to the Not in the Job Description podcast. I'm Scott McLaughlin.
And I'm Chris Kiernan.
Look at all the people around you. They may seem very different, but they all have something very much in common. Work. Most people have had a history of roles that's taken them to their current job.
Everybody has a story about their job and how they got there. We'll explore funny, gross, embarrassing, scary, and sometimes almost unbelievable stories that people have experienced at their jobs. So enjoy the conversations as people share things about their jobs that were not in the job description.
On today's show, we talked to Bob, who is a public information officer. Welcome, Bob.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going very well. I would normally introduce my co-host, Chris, but the reality is he's not feeling well, but we've been trying to make up stories. So I'm saying that he's in the middle of being extradited. So we'll just go with that this week.
Serious business then.
That's right.
Do you want him to be extradited, or were you thinking that you don't want him to be extradited?
You know, honestly, it depends on the day. I go back and forth.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, I can understand that. Some people I like to extradite. So.
Absolutely. So, again, thank you again for talking with us. I'm very curious now. Public information officer. When this was brought to my attention, I'll be honest, I didn't even know what the job was. So please explain to myself and the listeners kind of what is the public information officer?
Sometimes I don't even know what the job is, to be honest with you. Heck. So a lot of times, basically it's a communications type job. So work in a governmental type agency. It's not a secret governmental agency or anything, but I'm kind of being vague. But so you deal with a lot of communication. So you'll write things. In this day and age, there's a lot more media that happens than before. And so it used to be mostly a written kind of thing. So you do press releases, you do things like that, or you do stories that get in a newsletter of some sort, what have you. But over the years, as communication has progressed, then you have to do more things. And so I get into doing some audio and some video and, a lot of web-related things nowadays. So I suppose, into the realm of social media, but not in the same sense. Whenever people say social media, you think differently than really what it is. It's the same thing as a press release. It's just now instead of, going out to the press, you put it on social media. And so I'm not like trying to get, click subscribe.
Right. It's not clickbait. So
It's just more information that needs to get out to the public or to the constituents. But sometimes it involves doing things beyond, just regular stuff anymore. So
I was going to say, so is it a true statement that the title of public information officer is usually related to a government type job?
Yes.
Okay.
Typically, yes. I don't think I've ever heard of one that is corporate.
Yeah, it's funny.
Generally, they don't have that. Then they call you. They give you better names because it's a very old title, really.
That's interesting. I know I've been in the corporate world pretty much all my career, and what I see when I looked up like the types of jobs, first of all, almost every job I saw for this title had a .gov behind it, but it literally was from fire departments, police departments, health departments, like literally everything you can think of that happens to be government related. Yeah. There's some sort of job for this.
Yeah. It's a good job for a lazy person who doesn't want to do much.
I've been looking for that. Yeah, so, good.
Yeah. I mean, I think, kids, you're in college, you're on a career path, and you don't want to do much. You want to get a lot of holidays off. You may look into this career.
Man, this is looking better for me right now. Are you kidding? Forget the kids. Now, I did want to...
there's lots of them. I'm not telling you which area that I'm in, but yeah, there's lots of them.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, especially, from what I read, there's a lot of social media involved, and I think younger people skew towards that naturally. But let me ask you, from a perspective of, given that you're kind of the spin doctor for whoever you represent a little bit, how much of your work is proactive versus reactive to a scenario?
Oh, well, I like it all to be reactive because then I don't do anything in the interim. But sometimes you have to be proactive because but well, it's never really totally proactive, I suppose. Maybe this is a little inside baseball. Government loves to control things, so they
What?
love to control. Yeah, they love to control language. They
Oh,
love
yeah.
to control, the message. As you heard, probably, if you watch any kind of news show or anything, they always want to control the message.
Yeah.
And so the proactive part would be, but it's still partially reactive because you know that there's a message that needs to be controlled, and so then the proactive part would be to try to get in front of that and shape the language and start using, invent new words, or other
Right.
people invent new words for you, and you put it out there. And you use that in order to steer the conversation. So, global warming became climate change, just to give you a big example. But that's controlling the message, right? So when you first heard about it was global warming, right?
Right.
And then it wasn't so warm on some days, and they're like, well, it's not so warm. This is nothing happening. And they're like, wait a minute, we need to change that and make it climate change, because then it could be hot or it could be cold.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
It's more vague. So then you start using that, and then everybody starts using that. But if you look at kind of the source of these things, they may attribute them to other people, but chances are a governmental entity is the one who is spouting it enough for it to kind of catch hold. So I don't actually get into any of that area, to be honest with you, but that's just an example, a broad example of what the kind of things that might happen is that you would, want to, change the way people perceive something that's happening, and so you would kind of adopt new terminology.
Sure.
It's crazy. Everybody just comes up with all these terms, out of thin air sometimes. If you're involved in it, it makes more sense. But if you think back, you can think of all kinds of terms like global warming and climate change that
Sure.
you're like, I didn't even think of it. So right now, another big broad one is UFO is now UAP.
That's right. Yeah.
And that's a governmental thing, right? So you never heard UAP until the government got involved with UFOs.
Yeah. And I am kind of amazed that people just don't seem to care either way now.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like when I was a kid, if this was brought up, it would be on every channel. It'd be like the moon landing. It would be on every channel everywhere. People just kind of shrug it off like, okay.
Yeah. Everybody's kind of used to it at this point, maybe. So, yeah. So then that's the kind of stuff. That's not the daily kind of stuff. The daily kind of stuff is really boring, but that is the kind of area that you get into,
Sure.
I'm trying to think of one that's a little more niche, but
I'll tell you one right now. And this is something we never really heard of before. This past couple of years, and just for the record, we don't really get too political on this, other than just observational stuff. And misinformation. That terminology, I think, is hilarious because it doesn't mean that it's wrong information. It just means it's information we'd prefer you not to have.
Yeah. Well, fake news is one of those things too. It's
absolutely
like, fake news.
Yeah.
And whoever heard of fake news? Little kids say that. I don't know. It's like
right.
Jimmy said, "No, that's fake news," and it's like, but then people bought into it, and there you go.
But I think it's hilarious too. At least whoever's saying fake news, their stance, right? They just don't believe it. But to be misinformed isn't even saying that it's fake. It's just saying we would not inform you that way, which I think is genius.
Yeah. And so it's just weird stuff like that. But most of it's just, kind of moronic, everyday kind of stuff. You just, churn out the press releases. This is happening, that's happening,
Yeah.
whatever.
Now, if you ask me, it seems like the top public information officer is in the nation would be like the White House press secretary. They're understandably political and leaning toward the person who's in power at the time. But in your position, have you had to respond to like really bad news or anything where you're like, God, I don't even believe this, but I got to come out and say something?
Well, I'm typically I'm not the spokesperson necessarily. I'm more the back end person that writes things.
Got it.
There'd be somebody else who actually had to deliver that. But on the back end, there may be a small huddle that says, how can we make this better?
Yeah.
Or what should we, I'm trying, like if there's some kind of tragedy, Be like, we're doing everything we can to help the victims of blah, blah, blah,
Sure.
I don't want to sound jaded, but be very, kind of tone it down and be sympathetic and all this kind of stuff. So, yeah, I mean, and because you got to, government marches on. So these things happen and you have to put on the show. But,
Yeah.
Everybody's still going to go to lunch and, still do whatever they have to do. So
Yeah, you talk about not being jaded. I don't even know it's jaded. I mean, when this is your job, there's kind of a playbook, right? I mean, you're at the point where something happens and like, okay, hit on these points. We're here to help. We're sorry about the victims. We're doing everything that we can. Don't overcommit. I mean, there's got to be a playbook for some of these things, right?
Right. And then, and I mean, right now, there's big things with gender and so forth. You don't want to be on one side or the other,
right?
For the most part, so you want to play it all down the middle, and you don't want to rile anybody up. Basically, you're just there to keep everybody moving along and paying their taxes, and you don't want any, you don't want any picketers or rioters or anything like that. And, and keep it all status quo,
Well, I did have a question as well, because I saw all kinds of jobs for this title, but is it common in your experience to have like a whole team of public information officers that do different parts but kind of drive that message?
It depends on the who you're working for. So, for a small municipality or something, there just may be a person. But if you get into larger groups of governmental things, then there could be, several people working on things with a hierarchy inside there. So you'd have a face person, then you'd have, essentially writers. It's almost like a sitcom in a way. I mean, you got your star, and then you got all these people behind them telling them this is probably the good thing to do. And then you've got these political wranglers, like, the governor's not going to say that, and stuff like that. So it really is. It's ridiculous at times because there's so much scrutiny over the most mundane, moronic things, and you're change this to that, and okay, I don't think it matters, but
I'm telling you, Bob, I think this is ripe for a sitcom. I mean, you've got everything you need, right? You've got multiple people. You're punching up scripts. You're worried about how someone's going to be viewed, or you can't say this. I think that it's a long-term sitcom just waiting to happen.
You can restart it. Michael J. Fox did a show called Spin City.
Oh, see, that's the one thing of Michael J. Fox I never watched, so I'm late again.
Well, no, I mean, it's been a while, and it was towards the end of his time in the spotlight, as it were, because his illness and so forth. And Spin City he worked for the mayor. I can't remember what. I think it was the East Coast area, and he worked for the mayor, and he basically was the guy who was trying to make the mayor look good. And Barry Bostwick was the mayor, and he was kind of an idiot.
Oh, see, now I got to watch that. After Doc Hollywood, I think I started having kids, and then that stuff just kind of fell by the wayside for me. So let me ask you, what kind of training does somebody with a public information officer job go through? And is there even recurring training? I imagine that there are some things that you absolutely have to have.
The big thing would be basically a communications degree. And so generally people are in some type of communications. At this point, I'm not a young pup. And so, journalism used to be the key, but I think now you have to really be in kind of a multimedia facet of things. So you do videos and you do audio pieces, you do website work, which that was never part of the game a number of years ago, so not even 15 years ago for that matter. And so it used to be kind of journalism people or people who were English majors who didn't want to teach, things like that. So that was, but now I'd say, the problem is there's so much of a lure for, I just want to be a YouTube star, that you don't want to be a public information person. But essentially, they have the skills that are needed in the position now to not necessarily doing FaceTime, putting the face out there, but creating things to get put out there for people. So, but you don't have to be that good at it. Obviously, it's a government job. Come on, we're not. if everybody in the government were all the brightest and best people, the government would have a different pay scale. So
Yeah.
what is it? You can't you teach. Well, if you can't teach, then I guess you work in the government. So that's where I think it's at. That sounds terrible.
I can't imagine a more jaded person who wants to be like a social influencer and is stuck being a public information officer. I just can't. I mean, could you imagine that?
It would be great training, to be honest with you. It'd be great because you're selling something that, sometimes nobody believes in.
Yeah, right.
And you got to sell it, you got to put it out there and try to make it convincing. Or it doesn't have to be convincing. Just keep putting it out there until people kind of latch on to it.
Sure. Well, that brings me to my next question. Anyone who's done this over any long period of time with government, regardless of which side they're on, at some point, they're probably being asked to craft a message or a view of something that goes against kind of what they think. Do you run into that scenario often?
Oh, sure. I think the interesting thing that I've found over the years about kind of government work is you're kind of politically agnostic in a way, I suppose.
Oh, yeah.
Because everybody comes and goes. So you have a government job. You're not elected, right? You're not on a timer. You just, one comes in, one goes out. You deal with whoever's there. And
yeah, you're like the people working in the kitchen at the White House.
Yeah. Well, actually, more than that, it's people working higher up. I mean, the kooky thing is to me is that there's unelected people who have way more power than the elected people.
I would guess
because they've been there forever.
Right.
So they can't go against Michael J. Fox, for Christ's sake. He's been there for 20 years. You don't want to. You do that, you're never going to get a raise, or you're going to get worse duties. So,
right.
The mayor or the governor or whoever doesn't even know who the hell you are, and they don't care about you. I mean, and they can't really fire you, unless it's something terribly, egregious. But Michael J, he can, put the screws to you in 2 seconds because he knows the system. So, and he might be your supervisor for all in that situation. So. You always have to kind of steer the middle. And yeah, I mean, I've always thought through the years, if you work for the government, you shouldn't be allowed to vote. You should be treated like a felon.
Oh, that's funny.
Because honestly, because you are in the mechanism, right? It's almost like having insider information or, the government employs a lot of people. And if you think about it, they can hold sway over certain areas depending, because you could, if you were the head of something in the government, you could say, do it this, or you're going to get, really bad gigs, or you're going to, work your way out,
Sure.
And so that's why I think they really shouldn't be able to vote or anything, because they're too close to the system.
That is an interesting perspective. Yeah.
I can say that to you here now, but I wouldn't say that at work.
Of course not. Yeah. I mean, depending on the municipality you're in, I assume there's probably a bunch of people who think like, you should be voting with us, whoever's in the majority, wherever you are.
That's right. Well, no, they do. They bring it all to the office. And, obviously you meet people in life who are a little bit more zealots of some topics than others. And they bring it all to the office and try to get you to go. And I'm like, I'm just the middle of the road.
Yeah, the older I get, the realize I don't have the patience, or sometimes even the knowledge. Like even all the stuff, I'm all for respecting everybody and everything. But when you start talking about controlling the language and the pronouns and the cisgen, I don't even know what all this shit is. I mean, I don't have enough time in my life. I feel like I'm full. I just treat everybody with respect.
Well, but that's a good example of that group basically is trying to control the language. That's what they're doing with all this.
Yeah.
That they're pulling from the government playbook, and they're saying, you don't get to call us what you want. We're going to call us what we want, and here's what it is.
Yeah.
So if you just look at that whole phenomenon right now, with all that is straight out of the playbook, because they've got people who are, they're following it.
Right.
So it's successful. Good for them on that. They win that one.
They have they've controlled a lot of things, and this is just government. So lest anybody think we're talking about Democrats. Oh no, everyone does this, So
No, everyone does it.
yeah, everybody does it.
There's not a person who doesn't. Yeah,
Absolutely. So
it's all part of the game. So
the name of this podcast, of course, is not in the job description. So I'm very curious. You get this role. There's got to be scenarios where you talk to people where you're like, what the hell am I getting myself into? Do you have any interesting stories about being approached or having, to put together a message where you're just thinking like, what the hell am I doing here?
Well, I do have a story. The job that I was set to do has nothing to do with this story. So as part of this, like I said, I do kind of feel good things sometimes. And so my objective was I was supposed to go to this open mic night at a local establishment, a bar,
Okay.
and interview a person who was going to be performing. It's kind of a feel good thing. And so I go to the bar. I'm a little early, so I'm going to shoot a little video. I'm going to, interview the person on and off, interview them to write stuff, interview them on video so I can record something and then put it all together in a little package that goes out, is a nice feel good piece. I've got equipment. It's not, super high end or anything. And I'm standing outside waiting for everything to happen because I'm just an early bird. I'm habitually early for everything. And open mic nights aren't really necessarily good for being on time.
Sure.
And so I'm standing outside waiting for basically to let people in, I think, at that point, because the idea was I was going to catch them ahead of time, catch them while they were performing, and catch them after. So, and that was going to be hours, right? So I was going to be there for a while. And all these people are asking me because I'm carrying around stuff, and they're like, what are you doing? You with the local news? You with this? You with that? I'm like, no, I'm just here to talk to somebody. No news, it's nothing like that. And so this lady, she's asked me that question, and she kind of walks away, kind of pasting. And she was, a bit flamboyant, I suppose, in her appearance. I probably, if I'm out in the world, especially out in this world, which is not my usual kind of thing,
Yeah.
I probably look like a man in black or something, you know what I mean? I'm just kind of like this
Right.
G-man-looking guy out here at this open mic thing, and they're all kind of wondering what the hell's he doing here, and this lady keeps, kind of asking me a little bit, and then she comes over and she goes, I won a contest. I'm like, oh, I'm just trying to be nice because I'm out there, and in case anybody were to know me, they might know who I work for and everything, and I can't necessarily be rude. And they go, oh, really? So you won a contest? She's like, yeah. You want to know what it was? Sure. What kind of? I've loads of like if people are going to be singing, so maybe it's a singing contest. I thought. She goes, I can pick the most quarters up with my pussy.
Oh my God.
And I go, what?
Yeah, spin that story, Bob.
I go, what? It's like one of those things where not that it wasn't like I wasn't going to a strip club or anything. It was like a regular bar. It wasn't even a dive or anything.
That is crazy.
Nice, wholesome bar. And I go, huh? She's like, yeah, I picked up 8. I'm like, what? And then she proceeds to say, and I didn't use my hands.
Oh my God.
I had to squat down on the stack, and then I had to walk across the stage, and I didn't drop one.
Like, how does she expect you to respond to this?
Yeah, so I'm just saying a lot of and I don't even want to get a word out to where it sounds like I'm interested or not interested. I just want to be, I just want to be somewhere in the middle, to where it's like you can't tell, other than my shock, I suppose, which is probably obvious. But
right.
I'm like,
Well, if you were there with any kind of recording equipment or anything, you think she was like trying to get to the I'll prove it stage of her statement?
I wouldn't doubt it at some point. Yeah, I would. I don't know for sure that she was going that direction, and at the time I didn't think about it. But in hindsight, I think, I I think she again was thinking that I still was some person that was more than what I was, perhaps. You know what I mean? As far as this, and this is at a time. This is not recently. So this has been a number of years ago. And thankfully, she kind of walked away, and the door opened, and I was like, I gotta get out of here.
Oh yeah.
Because I don't want to get. I'm a married man, so I can't be. I mean, my wife found out about me shooting video of women picking up things, quarters
Look,
off the stage or whatever. It
Bob,
just may not go over well back home. So,
Bob, I don't know your wife, but I can tell you about my wife. She would say, "Oh my God, why would you even entertain that?" But then she'd say, "Did you get it on camera? Because if that really happened, she'd want to see it. It's like a car accident. You're gonna look that way. Yeah, I don't think we're looking away from that one, man.
I didn't want to go any further.
No, that's
I
fair.
basically had some work to do, and I was like, and I mean, it wasn't like, I guess let me put it this way. It wasn't necessarily that she was somebody that I wanted to see do that.
Got it.
From her looks.
Enough said. Enough said.
It wasn't that she was like gross or anything, but she certainly wasn't. It wasn't like, Cindy Crawford or you just name somebody, somebody like that. It was, probably somebody who had a rough time in life and probably drank too much, smoked too much. I don't know.
Maybe all those things, but I'm guessing a certain level of flexibility, though, right? I mean, I'm just guessing.
Yeah, I would have not, given her appearance, I would have not suspected that she was that flexible.
Interesting.
I was surprised that you could get down that low and then stand up and so forth. So that was one of my, your head just keeps going when somebody comes and says that to you. But she said it like, it's almost like, put your hand up. Hey, buddy, guess what?
Yeah.
It was that kind of a way she did it. It was weird. It was, I
That
don't
is
know if she's trying to get a rise out of me or what.
Yeah, that's the weirdest icebreaker I have ever heard. But I got to tell you, I don't have any special skills, so hats off to her. Good for her.
Yeah, well, no, I didn't feel at the time that it happened that I could say that.
Yeah.
I felt like I needed to not say anything, but just because, who knows? I mean, I didn't give her my card or anything. I said, hey, if I ever need.
Yeah. Hey, if it's a slow news week, I'm going to give you a call.
As soon as we get into the porno stage of this,
right.
Inhabitants of the world, then where everything's porno all the time, then I'm going to give you a call because you got a special skill.
Speaking of the ladies, I thought this was interesting. With regard to the public information officer, I was just doing a little research on it earlier, and I'm curious whether or not what I'm about to say jives with your experience with people in this role. It says that in this position, 75% of the people with this role are females. Is that what you've experienced as well?
I'd say probably currently, yes. It's definitely more of a female-dominated environment nowadays. Like I said, I'm a little bit older, so whenever I was kind of, coming up in all this, it was a little bit more evened out. And actually, there's probably more men at the time just because, it was all cigar chomping, good buddy kind of situation back in the day, where now it's a little bit more different now because, it's a communication thing, and I think more communication graduates now. Guys go to business school, and ladies like to go to communications, degrees. So I'm a dinosaur, man.
Well, I was going to ask you too. Based on your experience with this role, what? Now I'll preface this by saying I watched a guy on YouTube, and he was talking up his job as a public information officer, and he worked for a fire department in Colorado. And it was probably a 20-minute video, and part of his stuff was very proactive, where he was going, "Hey, the fire department's going to be out here doing whatever." Part of it was reactive, where he had to run out because something had caught fire, and he had to explain it, and news media was calling him to do things, to ask questions, that kind of thing. I mean, how much? But he did everything. Like he was crafting messages
Right, it
through.
was kind of a one-man show.
Exactly.
Kind of thing,
So, what percentage of this job is the face of delivering the message versus the people in the back helping to craft the message?
For me, it's not very much, but that's also because of being around, and that's why I think there's more women nowadays, is because that's always more sympathetic. I mean, I don't want to sound sexist or anything, but
it is what it is. Yeah,
a female face and a female voice is going to be way more sympathetic out front than a male voice, especially if they look like the establishment, right? So,
right.
So mine is not that been. I've been my whole thing is I mostly am doing what would be like writing and writing and kind of creating things rather than being on the front end of things. But I've also been in a position where there's other people who do that.
Yeah.
And do that better. So I'm fine with that.
Yeah, right.
It's a little bit different world. But yeah, there's a lot of kind of one person situations with a lot of these things that they just do everything, right? So then they got to go and say, come on down to the toy drive, or they go on the news and say, we're putting in car seats at the, at the fire station. And all that, and as well as writing the newsletter and keeping people informed and everything. And then, I'm lucky enough to where I don't have to do all of it. I just get to do parts of it. So.
Well, that's good. And that brings me to my final questions for you. What's the best part of your job?
The best part is probably that I've always, and I tell my kids this, I'm like, kids, you want to get a degree where you don't have to work too hard and you can stay in the air conditioning most of the day.
Smart.
And I don't know if they take it to heart. But,
well, if I ask that question, I'm going to ask, what's the worst part of the job?
Probably the worst part is just the monotony and how mundane it can get, where you write the same thing over and over again and try to make it sound fresh and interesting. And at some point, you just don't care. And so it's like,
yeah, I imagine after a while you feel like, have I already said this before? I mean, you've got to be worried.
I've already said this.
In the future, wouldn't you say this is ripe for artificial intelligence?
Probably, yeah. Probably going to get replaced. That's why I'm hoping to get out while the getting's good.
Well, hey, thank you very much for taking the time to talk with us today. This is normally when I ask my co-host what he learned. Since he's not here, I'll tell you right now what I've learned in talking with you. I think for my next career, I'm going to give this a look. You get to work 30, 24-hour weeks. You don't have to work so hard. You get to be in air conditioning. I think I'm going to check it out. Comparatively, you've got the world beat here. You got the world by the tail. So, hey, thank you very much, Bob, for joining us today. My name is Scott McLaughlin saying we'll see you at work.
Thank you for listening to the Not in the Job Description podcast. If you have a story you'd like to share, or if you'd like to be a guest on our podcast, please let us know by sending us an email with a brief description of your story to stories@notinthejob.com.
If you enjoyed this episode and want to hear more crazy stories, make sure you follow us wherever you get your podcasts and follow us on our social media, including Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Rumble, Instagram, and YouTube.